Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're like me, you watch a lot of tech YouTube videos from a lot of different channels, and a trend that I've been seeing a lot lately is a lot of YouTube channels, your Jay's 2 Cents I think just did a video on it, Linus Tech Tips has talked about it recently, Paul's Hardware has talked about it very recently as well. All these channels have been talking about RAM prices because currently there's a lawsuit where the companies that produce RAM are actually alleged to have artificially inflated prices by limiting their own supply so that they can sell the RAM at higher prices and all this. But the end result of all of this is still that RAM prices are very high for the end user. That's the consumer, that's you and me. So one of the things that you can do to get around that problem is actually by putting yourself on an older platform. I really like, for example, the Intel Haswell series of processors. That would be the 4000 series of Intel chips, because they are still really solid gaming chips, especially your i7s and probably even i5s still. But what I'm looking at today is actually an i5-3470 in this Dell rig behind me, and I'm really concerned with finding out whether we can still push it in gaming, and of course I'm not talking about streaming, just strictly gaming. Can it still do a really good job in 2018? So for this testing, we're going to be using this Dell Optiplex again. And I'm actually going to be using a 1050 Ti, and the reason for that is just simply I have a 1070 I would love to run the test here with, but as you can see, this graphics card it's just too long for this case. So we're going to be using a 1050 Ti, which in its own right is a very good 1080p graphics card. In fact, that's really what this graphics card is for, or the best resolution I would say for this graphics card. Either 1080p or less with the 1050 Ti's is the resolutions I'd be targeting with most games. Some games you could probably definitely get away with a higher resolution, like maybe MOBAs. CSGO, I'm sure you could as well. But we're just going to slot this guy in here. And the nice thing about the 1050 Ti's is that you just really don't have to do anything from just slotting in the graphics card. The other thing I'm going to be doing is going ahead and moving this hard drive out of the way. I'm actually just going to be using an SSD with an external hard drive, which will have then my games on it. So let's see if this 1050 Ti combined with a 3470, which I think is going to be a sensible combo, can actually game at 1080p in 2018. Okay, so here we go in our display adapters. We of course have the GTX 1050 Ti, and then of course under processor we have the 3470, the i5 here. Alright, so going into graphics settings here, we have resolution of 1920 by 1080 of course. We're going to make sure that VSync remains off. Looks like we have population density, looks like very high settings on most things here. I know these aren't the most optimum settings, but we are going to go ahead and check out how they do and see if this game is playable at those settings. So as we step out into the world here, you'll notice that we are running in the upper 30s, which is not the best frame rate, obviously. Usually, you know, if you're trying to hit 60 FPS, we may be able to do that with this card, but we're definitely going to have to tweak some settings. So let's drive around here for a second and see if that frame rate, which seems to be actually going up as we get into town, a little bit more confined space here. And what I love about GTA 5 is how well it actually runs on lots of different hardware. And I will say this, it's 1080p, which I'm not used to playing games at 1080p, but it does look quite good at 1080p, and the experience is very good right now. I mean, it's smooth, it's not jumpy, it's not jittery. So that is for the most part looking like mid 40s for the FPS, and that's with mostly very high settings. Let's see if we can get this FPS number up a little bit though. So let's knock these settings down to high instead of just very high or even ultra in that setting. And let's limit tessellation as well. Let's see what high settings across the board do for us. Okay, so it looks like we have our FPS number, and that looks like it's mostly around 50 FPS. Driving through the city, when you get into tall buildings around you, that number goes up. We just hit just over 60 there. But then when you're out in the wide open area, it looks like it's more like low 50s, very high 40s occasionally. Actually, we got into the low 40s right there. But we are definitely still at playable frame rates. And the other thing that I have confidence in, especially with how well this game actually scales to different hardware types, if we turned off some other things like some of my anti-aliasing, I'm sure is taking up a lot of extra horsepower, we could probably get this game to 60 FPS without a whole lot of lost graphical fidelity. So I'm pretty happy with the way that GTA runs on this 3470 and 1050 Ti combo. So let's go ahead and hop over to The Witcher 3 and see just how well that performs. So starting out here, we are running most of our settings at medium, and The Witcher 3 has a lot going on, so we're going to go ahead and use those settings, and let's see just how well this game performs with medium settings. Okay, so getting into town here, our frame rate is holding in the mid to upper 40s, depending on where we're looking around at the time, which is actually somewhat impressive. I was not really expecting this game on medium settings at 1080p to do that well, and actually we just saw a, let's fight this guy. Well, that was easy. Might as well loot him while we're here. So now that we are in town and it's light out, the frame rate is actually doing quite well. We're in the low 60s right now, upper 50s. As we sort of walk around, there's quite a few people bustling about here. The frame rate's actually doing really, really well, and that is really good to see from this combination, because this, in my mind, is a very sensible combination, the 1050 Ti and that 3470. And yeah, frame rate is holding steady in the 50s and lower 60s, so I cannot complain at all about that frame rate right now. Okay, as we hop into the game here, we have VSync off, frame rate capped at 300. Trust me, we won't get there. And the graphics preset is on Epic. So as we get out of the menu here, we notice that at least in the spawning area, we have a 70 FPS 60s there. So as long as we stay above 60 FPS, most people would be very pleased with that. So yeah, I'm very happy with the performance right now of this setup. For Overwatch here, looks like mid-70s is sort of what we can expect. Okay, so we just lost the first round there, but frames per second stayed in the 70 to 75 range. So I'm going to call this a success as well for Overwatch. We're going to move over to League of Legends, which is another sort of easier esports title to play, to just sort of see what type of frames we can get in that title. Okay, once again, hopping into our settings, everything is maxed out at very high settings. Anti-aliasing is actually on. And unsurprisingly, from the start, we are running at like 120 frames per second there. Nothing really surprising at all about that. So let's wait till some of the minions start, and actually let's go down mid lane. Let's wait till the minions get here, as well as some other champions, to see just what that frame rate looks like. Alright, so we are later in the match here, and you'll notice that the frame rate does go down in large fights, or at least any kind of bigger fights here, but we're still well above 60 FPS. Even at the lowest that I've seen so far this match has been about 80 FPS. So once again, we're calling this another success here for the old 3470 and the 1050 Ti. So those are the results, and obviously you can still game at 1080p with a very budget-friendly gaming setup. In fact, this entire setup, the 1050 Ti paired with an SSD no less, and that Dell Optiplex, all cost me less than $500 when you total it all together, and that gives you a very good 1080p gaming performance with modern games too. The Witcher 3 is still a graphically demanding game and did very well. Obviously GTA 5 there, another fairly demanding game, even still in 2018, did very well. More modern AAA games, you may have to play with settings a little bit more to really hit that 60 FPS at 1080p. But then of course those esports titles were cake for this setup. So if you are building or buying a system and you want to avoid DDR4 prices right now, DDR3 platforms can still be a solution that's viable for you. The thing to remember with these DDR3 platforms is, for the most part, if you're getting an i7, for example, you're going to have 4 cores and 8 threads, which is going to prevent you from doing probably live streaming from the same PC and gaming all on the same PC. So if you're a streamer, you may be better served to go and get something like a Ryzen processor and just bite the bullet that way. But if you are just looking at gaming as well as day-to-day use, like web browsing, that sort of thing, Netflix, I'm sure, would be on that list, then you can still get by for sure with a DDR3 platform from years gone by. So of course, here's where I kick it back to you. Are you still gaming on a system that uses DDR3 RAM? And if you are, let us know what that system is and what type of performance you're seeing, and you can leave those in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this content, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And also, as always, I'll let YouTube go ahead and queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.